Hello, friends and seekers, and welcome back to Divine Journeys podcast. I am delighted to introduce you to a fabulous yoga instructor, Hillary Kallenberger. Hello, Hilary.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, wonderful. I was so excited to get reconnected with you recently.
It was amazing. It was divine timing for sure.
I believe in divine timing, and that's why we have Divine Journeys.
Absolutely.
Hilary, tell us about yourself and where you grew up, and I want to then bounce into your yoga journey.
I grew up in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, primarily. I've moved around a bit, but that's where I was born and raised. Was a dancer starting off. We can maybe talk about that a little bit more. I went on to pursue a career in mental health, and I've since kind of come around from there, but always been a big movement enthusiast. I've been teaching yoga for about 20 years now, and just very, very blessed to do what I do.
Well, you look like a dancer. And so I want to talk more about that and why you shifted from dancing to yoga.
Yeah, so I started dance at a very young age. My mom enrolled me in ballet when I was probably as early as I was allowed to be enrolled. She thought I was a very shy child, and so she thought that it would help with that. And so that was initially how I got into dancing, and then it was just always a part of my life. I don't remember ever not dancing. I grew up in an environment where I didn't have a lot of emotional outlets to express emotions, to process my feelings. And so I think for me, that was kind of, I lived in my body from a very early age, and dance became my outlet to process all kinds of things, whether it was in the studio, whether it was performing, whether it was dancing in my room and making up choreography to different soulful songs that, for some reason I was, kind of subconsciously using that as my outlet, as my kind of healing practice, I guess, even though I didn't realize I was. And then that became kind of a double-edged sword because for me, dance was on one hand where I felt the most connected to my body and sometimes the most beautiful. And on the other hand, it became, especially as I got older into my teen years and developed more of a muscular body, that I also started to feel very inadequate. It became a struggle. I started having some eating disordered behavior at a very young age. I think I was probably around 12 years old, but somebody that I really admired who was an older dancer basically taught me how to be bulimic. And so, and I accepted that as kind of just what we did. And so I adopted that very early on. And it was a struggle for most of my life. And dealing with my body became a big struggle. So on one hand, dance was this outlet that I needed where I could process my emotions and where I felt beautiful and I could move. And then on the other hand, there was this struggle because I never felt good enough. I never, I was very competitive and I wanted to be the best and I was a perfectionist. And that translated not only into my dancing, but into my relationship with my body. So I danced until probably I went to NYU at Tisch School of the Arts. I was a dance major there. And about halfway through, or I guess probably 3 semesters into that, I kind of I had some trauma at a younger age, some different things that didn't really get dealt with the way they should have. And by the time I was about 20, it all kind of just hit the fan. And
well, let's just stop there for a second because
yeah.
I think you hit on something. First and foremost, let's go back to the dancing world.
Okay.
The dancing world, my insight into it was watching the Black Swan movie with Natalie Portman. And to see how the competitiveness of it and then this pressure to be lean. So your dance history versus yoga history. When you had that experience of the competition and not feeling good enough, what caused you to find yoga? Was it someone who introduced you to that, or was it some kind of need because you needed to have a step away from the dancing world?
So when I left the dancing world, I was essentially pretty lost. I didn't really know what to do with my body. I felt like I was full of a lot of anxiety, a lot of things that I'd never been given the tools on how to process my emotions. And so initially I started just exercising. I became a group fitness instructor. I started running. I started cycling. I was like, I've got to move my body. Because of years of dancing and impact, I was injured a lot. So a good friend of mine said, I think you should come to this yoga class with me. I think you would really love it. And that's how I was introduced to yoga initially. And it was an immediate love affair for me. I walked into the studio and I started, and moving and following the instruction. And somewhere deep inside of me, I knew that this was where I was supposed to be. I didn't really understand it all at the time, but I knew that was where I was supposed to be. And so for me, it gave me a very similar joy that dance gave me. It allowed me to really be in my body and express myself through movement and feel beautiful and aligned and connected to myself and bigger things. But it didn't have the competition. It was a way that I could do that and still be accepted for who I was and in the body that I was given. And I wasn't trying to be something else to fit in. It was giving me kind of a doorway or access to just be me. And it took a long time from that first yoga class, but that was the beginning of the journey.
Well, and you said that when you stopped dancing, a lot of your identity was placed as a dancer. And
Right.
So to make that shift, it sounds like with yoga, it allowed you to still be physical, but it brought you to a deeper awareness of what you said was about alignment in your body, which I would imagine with ballet, you see how hard you're working on a daily basis and how hard you are on your body, but you are also being hard on yourself to
Right.
then transition to yoga, which is much more about loving your body, loving the body you're in.
And it also took the performance out of it, right? So I could go in and move my body, but there was nothing that I had to achieve, and I didn't have to perform for anyone, and I didn't have to spend hours rehearsing to get it right. I just got to show up, move my body, leave, and that was it. And there was just kind of this peace that came with that. And I remember the first big impactful moment on my yoga mat. We were like in a wide-legged forward fold, and all of a sudden I just, like, tears just came out of my eyes, and I started bawling, and there was nothing on my mind. I wasn't really thinking about anything. There was nothing specific going on that would have caused that. And I was like, what is happening right now? And that was the first time that I really understood how we can move emotions through our body, even on a subconscious level, just by getting into our bodies, just by creating shapes and finding movements and connecting with our breath and letting whatever is within us come out and up to be released. And that's when I realized this is a place that I can heal. And I immediately knew I wanted to be an instructor because I was like, I want to share this gift with other people.
Oh, wonderful. So how long were you practicing yoga before you decided to go through the certification program for yoga as an instructor?
I want to say a day, but it was immediate. It was like, I know this is where I want to be. I know that I want to teach. I had been teaching most of my life. I started teaching dance when I was in high school to younger kids. And then, like I said, when I quit dance, I became a group fitness instructor and I taught cycling classes. And so I just always had this kind of, I love teaching. And so when I found yoga, I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be teaching. This is my element. This is my thing.
Oh, so it's a natural segue.
It was just an immediate step into kind of like, this is what I've been looking for.
So talk to us about the yoga certification. Where did you get your certification and what does that process entail?
My 200-hour certification I got with, the training program was called Bryce Yoga at the time. I believe it's no longer, but it was with Beone Smith and Dicetta Klein. They're based out of Southern California. It was a couple team. I was very fortunate to have two studio owners in Oklahoma City who were dear friends and who were extremely supportive of me. And I don't know if it was my passion or my gift, but they immediately saw it, brought me into the studio, and they said, yes, you're meant to be a teacher. They right away started saying, take this class, sub this class, start practicing, come with me to this workshop. So I was pulling in as much information as I could from all the places that I could find until this teacher training program became available. And this program was I believe it was a 12 or 15 month program. I can't remember. They would come into Oklahoma City. We would have a week intensive. And then we'd have a few months in between of sending in videos every week, sending in audio recordings of ourselves cueing, doing homework, studying different things. So there was a lot involved with it. I do personally believe that any good teacher training program should be at least a year, because it takes a lot of time to get the knowledge and then to integrate it and to really be able to understand what you're teaching. Even after my 200 certification, although I was very fortunate because I had a natural gift of understanding how the body works. I had studied lots of anatomy and kinesiology. And like I said, I lived in mine for a really long time. It came fairly natural to me to get that done. So that's kind of where I started. And then I really studied as many different lineages of yoga as I could to try to figure out what makes sense. I remember one of my first teaching gigs was teaching kind of a Bikram style yoga and kind of understanding what that's about and the alignment involved and why is it sequenced the way that it's sequenced. I had a lot of really great Ashtanga teachers that I practiced with, and I didn't teach it, but I did practice a lot, kind of understanding how that worked. My teacher training was a little more of a traditional Western power yoga base. It was kind of skimming the surface of all the things. I mean, it was well-rounded, but it was really focused more on just kind of basic cueing, basic alignment, basic sequencing, things like that. And so it was almost later that I really feel like I started developing the real knowledge for how I teach now. And that was by pulling from all the different places, not subscribing to like, I'm this teacher or I studied just this lineage. I really wanted to learn everything I could, incorporate it together, and then see what made sense to me.
I'm glad that you're talking about how you've integrated several forms of yoga. And for the listeners, there is an episode of Divine Journeys where I actually talk about the most common forms of yoga, the different styles of yoga. And so you've mentioned the Bikram yoga and then the Ashtanga. So as listeners are maybe newer to yoga and what you've done, what you started, because when I started yoga, I went to a chain. They didn't have any labels for the yoga. It was basically you're in a level 1 or level 2. And then there was the occasional restorative class. And when I went into yoga classes, it was very much, I felt intimidated because it was almost people were there for the workout, right? You saw a lot of people just powering through different poses. For you were already so athletic, and then it was a natural transition into yoga. I want to talk about what is your philosophy about yoga, especially for somebody who's new and can be intimidated by I don't know these Sanskrit's, poses, the asanas, the names. I'm just going to kind of peek around and see, who's doing what. For the new yogini or yogi, what would you tell a first timer or somebody who's interested in yoga?
I think that is, that's really important. I think that it can be very overwhelming, especially as someone who's new, who's never experienced it, who maybe is a little disconnected from their body in general, especially who might be intimidated because of limitations, because I'm not flexible enough or I'm not thin enough or, all these stories we tell ourselves about why yoga is not accessible. For me, what I learned in my personal journey of kind of practicing these different styles and trying to understand kind of what they meant. So what I learned was that I don't think there is one right way to do anything. I think that, the most important thing you can do is find a community where you feel supported and accepted. Find a studio where you don't feel intimidated walking in. You don't feel like it's a social club. You don't feel like you have to have a certain amount of knowledge to be able to get on your mat and practice. My goal as an instructor is to make yoga as accessible to every human that I encounter as I can and demystify these myths that you have to be able to stand on your hands or put your foot behind your head. And all those things are super fun. And it's great if you want to work towards that or do that, but that's not really why we show up on our mat. And as I progressed and I started to integrate these things, my 500 hour, I did quite a few years later. I waited to get that done just because I was a single mom. I had a lot going on and I just had financial limitations to getting that further education. But when I did, it was very Anusara based, and I really was able to not only dive into, during that 500-hour, a deeper understanding of how we're moving our bodies and why, but I learned to kind of back up a little bit, to reassess everything I thought I knew, and to look at it through a lens of what makes sense here. Because what makes sense in my body might not make sense in your body. And the alignment cues for one person might not work for another person. So is there really just one way to do it? A lot of people will say yes, but I don't believe so. And that was also a time that I was able to really dive. That's when I began kind of my real personal journey of healing, kind of just right before I moved into that 500-hour space. And I was able to dive a little deeper into my spiritual connection and my connection with myself, and really take the steps to truly heal my relationship with my body. So that all came at a really beautiful time, because I also started to ask myself, why are we getting on our yoga mat? Is it to burn a bunch of calories? Is it to have a yoga butt? Is it to have a group of friends? And none of those things are wrong by any means. But in my opinion, the reason that we want to step on our yoga mats, or why I feel like a yoga practice is very important to anyone, is to connect to ourselves, to remember who we are through our bodies, and more importantly, through our breath, and being able to get present in the moment. So however you get there, I think is the right way for you. I don't think there's one path or one lineage that's going to lead you there. I don't think that there's any guru out there who's going to teach you anything that you can't find within yourself. And that's kind of my big focus, is how can you tap into your own wisdom, to your own innate intuitive knowledge, through connecting with your body, through listening to your breath, to really getting into the present moment, embodying emotions as they come up. How do you treat yourself on the mat? If I offer, let's just say, a handstand in practice, how do you handle that? Are you operating from your ego? Are you operating from a place where you have humor? Like, well, I've never done that, but let's try it because it's something new and I'm going to grow for it. Are you criticizing yourself because you can't do it right and you're not good enough? Because those are the real important questions that I think come up on a yoga mat, because that's the stuff that we're carrying inside of us. And that's the place that we're living our life from. So if we're doing it on the mat, if we're beating ourselves up, if we're not good enough on the mat, how can we be good enough out in the world?
Great correlation, right? Like, most probably don't realize, like, how you show up on the mat is an extension of who you are once you leave the mat, once you leave the studio, once you've finished your practice. And that, I think, is an important evolution that most of us who've practiced now, like you, I started in 2004. So it's been a 20-year practice, and that's just it. It's a practice. But I started, and it was more because I wanted to heal my knees a little bit from the running, and get more limber. But as the practice grew, and then I had my own trauma of 3 miscarriages in a row, and found that yoga became my sanctuary. And so how, when you have somebody who comes to you for maybe initially the exercise of yoga, tell us a little bit about what you observe in your students to know where are they on their journey.
I also believe that whatever gets you there is what gets you there. And let's honor that. Let's honor if it's because you have pain in your body, or whether it's because somebody just said you should try yoga, or maybe you think you're going to get a yoga butt. Who cares why you get onto your mat, first of all? And then what I try to do in every group setting and every individual setting, because I get a lot of students that come to me in private settings because they are intimidated to go into a studio. And they maybe trust me for whatever reason. And they say, can you kind of show me the ropes before I enter into that, that community? What I try to do is just sprinkle the nuggets of wisdom that I've learned along the way and share some of my experience. But the best thing that I can do as a teacher is really help my students silence their mind, feel their bodies, and learn how to breathe. Because that's really the reason we're there. I mean, I will tell my students, I don't care if you lie on your back for the next 60 minutes, I just want you to connect with your breath. If you're not breathing, we're not really practicing yoga. We're moving our bodies, and it's great, and it's physical exercise, and we'll get tons of benefits from that. But if you really want to implement a yoga practice that's going to change your life, that's going to make you more present, more mindful, more connected to yourself, better into the world, being able to take that and be of service to others. It's really through the breath every single time.
And I liked what you said too about if you show up on the mat and you just want to just be on your mat and not do any of the poses. I think sometimes people don't understand that that's actually yoga. Even if you're just there in a meditative state and you are surrounded, I mean, it almost takes more guts, I think, for someone who is feeling overwhelmed in the classroom and seeing like, I can't do that pose and I'm just exhausted, to go into child's pose and just to rest. It almost requires more strength.
I was just going to say, it takes more strength to honor your limitations than to push from your ego. Absolutely.
And that's beautiful. Say that again, Hilary.
What did I just say? It takes more strength to honor your limitations than to push from your ego.
Amen. And I think that's why I love yoga so much. The sense of like really understanding who you are, that alignment of your body, then your mind, your heart, and spirit is what my personal evolution has been. And, I know that that's the same for you, Hilary. And that's why I was wondering about how, when you're instructing different levels, I'm sure you kind of got bored with just the classroom with your basic yoga moves. So how did your personal teaching of instructing also evolve?
So I teach kind of from a very intuitive place now. I used to be very structured, coming from being a dancer and a perfectionist, like I had everything planned out and this is what we're going to do. And then I realized I wasn't really walking the walk by doing that, right? So I also have to honor what's coming up for me. I have to honor who's walking into the room, because I don't always know who's going to show up for a class. Let's say a class, for instance. I might have someone who's been practicing longer than I have. I might have teachers in there. I might have someone, it might be their first class. And then, most people kind of fall somewhere in the middle. When I teach, first of all, I try to make it very clear that I'm always going to offer modifications for anything we're doing. At any point in time, you can stop, you can rest, you can say, no, thank you, I'm not doing this. You can ask questions and say, this hurts my knee, what could I do instead? And I'm also going to hopefully offer options to push people who have practiced longer to say, all right, this looks like it feels really good for you. Let's try this and see what happens. My favorite thing to do is really to teach to who walks in the door and who sits down in front of me. And that includes not only the physical bodies and, their experience, but also what kind of energy is walking into the room. If I walk in and my class is like, I'm like, they need to move some energy. There's a lot going on here. But sometimes I come in and it's just silent. And I'm like, all right, everyone's feeling a little heavy today. I intuitively feel like this is where we need to go today. This is how we need to move today. And then again, coming back to always, when I'm teaching, tapping into why we're doing what we're doing. And I will explain that physically. I will say, we're hugging our feet together because we're engaging our inner thighs, because it turns on your transverse abdominis, and this is going to, and that's all great. But at the end of the day, we're showing up to feel connected, to remember that we are whole, that we are perfect, that we are complete, like exactly as we are right now. We were complete yesterday. We're going to be complete tomorrow. But to remember to come back to the present moment, because we'll never feel it if we can't drop into this space now. The here and now is really the only place we can access that true gift of connection to ourselves, to spirit, to the wholeness of this beautiful life that we get to live.
Wow, I think that's absolutely wonderful for the listeners to hear, that the present moment, as you're gifting yourself that time on the mat, and just to pay attention to breath and then move. And even when it is intimidating to hear about a pose that maybe you're not quite there, but somebody else is, I think it's really healthy to observe and just go, okay, well, that's where I want to evolve to. That's where I can see the practice will be able to evolve to that. Not where I have to get to that today.
Yeah.
But just honoring where we are in our practice.
Because there's always somewhere else to go. There's no like, I now have conquered yoga and I've got it all under control, right? I mean, and again, that's the yoga on our mats that's translating into life. I mean, we have goals, we have ideals, we have things that we want to do, but at the end of the day, we're a work in progress all the time, and our bodies change. I cannot do a lot of things that I could do 15 years ago. I have a 15-year-old older body that has new limitations. So I have to honor those limitations. How am I going to live in the outside world if I think that I'm going to be like at a certain level all the time? I'm not going to give myself any grace to just be human and to be, imperfectly perfect or perfectly imperfect, however you want to phrase that. But that's part of it too, is just showing up as you are. The hardest part about a yoga practice is stepping onto your mat, is to showing up. And that's the hardest part in life sometimes, is literally just showing up.
Oh, Hilary, that's fantastic. I want to continue this interview, and right now that's all that we have time for today. So I want to continue our conversation. Listeners, come back for part 2, because there's more wisdom that I want to have Hilary share with us. So until next time, just subscribe and make sure to like and comment. Let us know where you are on your yoga journey. And if you have any questions, just so that we can be able to answer those, or any show ideas. Until next time, namaste. Thank you, Hilary.
Thank you.
Spread the love and be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share the channel with fellow journeyers. The positive vibes will come back to you in abundance. And be sure to join the Divine Journeys Community Facebook group to connect with like-minded seekers. Namaste, my friends.